As it exists today, we are a society imprisoned by chains, and these chains are multitude, but they stem effectively from one source, and the source is a misunderstanding, um, a cosmological misunderstanding of the actual the cosmos, the actual nature, the way that the universe works. So this is the separation between the conception of the world and the reality of the earth. And these are all sort of, you could think of any idea or any ideology or any thought as a projection um, of the screen of Maya. So this is the kind of veil of Maya concept that is common to Hindu mythology. This is also present in Schopenhauer. I'll let the cat in. Come on in. Come on. But this idea being present that there are all of these sort of human manufacturings, I call them in my writings prostheses or prosthetics, that are sort of attachments to this human being concept. And the human being concept is, what is the human being? And there's this whole sort of network or idea of societies, global societies, tribes, obviously in historical context, and now the modern global society that has been created, kind of fashioned out of this economic super system of suppliers and demand, um, producers of resources and goods, and consumers. And this network is the thing that powers the entirety of global civilization. And what we believe to understand is but a sort of a projection on the wall, or in Plato's terms, the shadow of the fire on the wall of a cave. And we proceed down this road of sort of endless consumption and material gratification, all the while with this unceasing emptiness, which comes from this endless, ceaseless drive to progress, thinking that we are going to resolve this fundamental emptiness by creating a prosthetic that is going to cure the ills of the soul. And so we have this world that's in prison and this world that's in chains, and it is solely through the idea. Because again, the idea, what it implies is a conception, and there is, in this kind of real nature, a perception, which is the reality of the thing itself, that the human being is reaching for, but reaching for from without, thinking that we're going to resolve this through some sort of modern material science, or we're going to resolve this through primary accumulation of objects or people or dominions or land. And this kind of small-mindedness, which is, you could almost say, native to human history, is what chains the human being to time. So you could think of these empires and civilizations that come and go, and in the Shelley Ozymandias poem, they all that's left is kind of the shattered statue or relic of the king's statue, which you can also, I think, see, of course, in Egypt, these shadows of empires. You can see this in Greece, obviously in America as well. You can see it everywhere. Because it's buried and embedded in the very fabric of the earth itself. It becomes the stone that becomes the sediment of the soil. So what we struggle with here is the meaning that comes from cosmos, not cosmology. And cosmos is, at last, right, there's a certain point, and this was something native to ancient astronomers and astrologers, since as far back as we know, even going back to Babylon, right? We have a very limited scale of human history is that we're struggling to identify some sort of meaning or reason that is native to the cosmos and not just artificially generated. And this is precisely where the kind of decadence of modernity and global civilization at this moment in time steps in, is that the human beings have almost made themselves an enclosure or a greater cave, right? Again, to return to the Plato analogy, an enclosure or a greater cave through which the projection of what the world is overlaid atop the earth, right? So we're living very clearly in a world. And when we say world instead of earth, we're saying sphere of influence that has been generated by the imagination. So, in the same literary term as something like world building, um, we create and manufacture this reality and step into it and live in it as it was reality, and wonder why things don't work, why relationships fall apart, or why the earth seems to be collapsing under the weight of the world ideal and the world idea. And this returns to the self world synthesis, the self and other. In this case, other would be world, and self would be the kind of subject that's peering out from behind the lens or the mask of the sense perception mechanism. And we wonder why our senses outwardly perceiving cannot grasp the thing itself or the cosmos. And I say cosmos, cosmis, as opposed to cosmos, because the cosmos would be the thing itself of the cosmos, the cosmos, the nature. And to grasp this is to be entirely without ideas and to be native to existence. And this is the immediacy of being without becoming, right? There's no sort of turning world around the being. It's a silent stillness or emptiness, and this is the being a part of being itself. And through this sort of meditative lens or insight, we move through the cosmos into the cosmos as a sort of teleological extension of being, that there is, of course, what is observable to the human eye, ear, nose, mouth, what have you. And this is what we struggle with in terms of what has been and continues to be a hyper-materialist conception of science, because what we believe to be grasping or quantifiable or qualifiable is all within the realms in terms of this sense body perceiving, as in looking, hearing, tasting, smelling, touching. And when we do this, we are setting up this sort of a priori or framework before the framework of any sort of scientific project that is really the limits of being human or the human being. And this is always a looking from without. And in the vein of the kind of ancient Kashmiri philosopher Abhinavagupta, there's the question of what happens when we look within. What do we find? And what I say we find there is we find the entirety of the cosmos, as in the cosmos, and that is the very nature of being itself. And what we confront there is the sort of terrifying abyssal nature of the Kali in the Hindu tradition, but also the primordial womb of existence and creation, which is also the black sun in alchemy, where all things come from and return. And we have this encounter with the primordial abyss and realize that this is, in fact, us. But furthermore, there is something emerging from beyond that. That is our sort of native God self, or the creative force of being that emerges, the thrust of the being toward life. That is the progenitor and generator. And this sort of cosmic generator is in the vein of Heraclitus, the cosmic fire, which is the composition of all things, as well as obviously in Plato, the shadows of the fire dancing upon the wall. So you go out into the light of day and see the native fire. And what this is this is done without any prosthetics. This is done without any sort of logic or reason or rationality. It is a direct interfacing with the nature of being itself, which is the nature of being oneself. And moving away, and this is kind of the chaos of modernity. If you want to think of the period of the Industrial Revolution, building up into the technological revolution of the internet, personal mobile technological devices, there is this jump that happens in the span of, let's say, 120 or 130 years, if you want to extend it that far, that there is this massive advancement of prosthetic technologies that they claim to be adding on to the human condition, right? There's this whole idea of the convenience of more. Um, and what happens is that humanity is feeding on this sort of dead source that needs to feed on humanity in order to sustain it. This is any sort of, you could think of a structure of social governance or a structure of the internet or the structure of artificial intelligence, is that the common force and factor behind it is that these things are dead. They are human ideas and human conceptions and human philosophies and human cosmologies that what we're attempting to do is control space or control time or control nature or control human nature. And what happens with all of these things and forces is that they become these repressive cages, like a Prometheus chained to the rock, that limit and inhibit and kill and destroy the native fire of existence and creation. And what is necessary is to be as free as the cosmos is. And that freedom is necessarily boundless, right? This is something that obviously materialist scientists can't even begin to describe, the boundless and limitless nature of the cosmos, right? They're always attempting to extend further and further into seeing hundreds of thousands of galaxies that exist in the far reaches of what they term as space, but really what this is the timeless extension of the body of the cosmic Christ, or the body of the cosmos, that this is a native and fluid being of which we are simultaneously the point of and the thing itself, and that there's this sort of endless crucifixion, that each moment is a crucifixion of time and place in the body of the cosmic Christ, and that all of the blood of the cosmos is flowing and flowing endlessly through this one point of the being itself. And what is necessary is to step natively into that, as opposed to, right, these endless technological distractions and inventions that posit themselves as knowledge or reason or ulterior beings that actually are not, in fact, the body and blood, so to speak, of the cosmos, right? They are these dead things that need human native intelligence and energy to not only support them, but effectively be them. They assume that identity like a mask, but they cannot exist without that support and without that body and without that blood. So when we're talking about the spirit and the flesh in particular, what we're talking about is not a projection, it's an emanation of the spirit. And this is what is natively a part of the cosmos. And as human beings, right, this is a sort of spiritual heritage, right? This is the birthright between the realms of the living and the dead, that we sort of straddle this material existence being the thing itself. In that there is this sort of attention or awareness that is necessary to discern, especially in a sort of, I was terming it in this poem here, this sort of godless dimension, that is the failure to evoke God, being seduced by images and mirrors and tortured by projections, living in animal lust and fear, technology severed from the body, cold in a fleshless prison, to power the engines of their empires. More with ease is their slogan, endlessly feeding on empty knowledge, dying with swollen stomach, fed to the beast of time, endlessly marching forward, fleeing the past of the soul, still rhythms of the flesh. This moving away from being human. And what is necessary in being human is a confrontation with the very fabric and a kind of abyssal nature of the primordial womb itself. and that we face that is that we are being human, and that we turn away from it into distraction is that we fail to evoke God.